Let's talk about history. 10 or 20 years ago, the main problem on the farm was contagious bacteria, such as Staphylococcus aureus or Streptococcus agalacti. The problem increased every year. The negative effect was the decrease of milk quality, an increase in the number of somatic cells in milk, of course the presence of pathogens potentially dangerous to human health, a decrease in milk yield, and last, an increase in the use of antibiotics during lactation. That means in the period where is the risk of antibiotics getting into the bulk tank. That's why a 5-point mastitis plan was introduced. It includes post-milking teat disinfection, totally cow therapy in dry period, antibiotic treatment of all clinical cases during lactation, proper milking machine maintenance, and culling chronic cows. Infectious pathogens cause an increased number of somatic cells in other of sick cows, making it almost impossible to infect the mammary gland by environmental bacteria like E. coli, Klebsiella, or Streptococcus. Therefore, when Staph aureus and Strep agalactiae began to disappear in herds, E. coli and Streptococcus began to become more and more problematic on the farms. As the 5-point plan reduced the pressure of only contagious bacteria, milk quality specialists started to think about expanding this plan to include points to reduce the problem with environmental bacteria. This is how a new plan called the 7-point mastitis plan was created by Mr. Hemling. This is a modified 5-point mastitis plan. Added points to it. First, make a clean, dry, and disinfected teats. Use nutrition, stimulants, and vaccination to improve immunity. It's a 2nd point. Third and last, total dry cow therapies were changed to selective. And why selective dry cow therapy is still controversial in our countries, in my opinion, and we should think a lot before introduction this, the impact of nutrition and vaccination, in my opinion, has been underestimated for too long. We should always remember that mastitis is not only a result of the penetration of bacteria into mammary gland. And if we stop at this point, we'll be sorry, but we'll be only veterinarians who, as the main element in the fight against mastitis, use antibiotic tubes. And it's not modern. And the effect of this will be not satisfactory either for us veterinarians or animal owners. Let us remember that mastitis will occur only in situations, first, when we have weak immune system or high bacterial pressure in environment, and third, both. And if you have on the farm both weak immune system and high bacterial pressure, to be honest, we have really terrible situation. And please remember that antibiotics only help proper working immunity to fight with pathogens. In short, I would like to say what motivates us vets in Poland to change our thinking from only treatment to comprehensive approach. First, antibiotic treatment don't bring money for farmers, it is only associated with losses. Second, new antibiotics law in Europe. United Europe wants us to decrease the use in antibiotics about 50%. Broadly understood livestock industry like vets and farmers is obligated to limit the use of antibiotics and their prudent use. The reason for that is the increased antibiotic resistance in bacteria that cause both animal and human disease. And remember that cow can infect people and people can infect bacteria. Mostly we have similar pathogens. Every year we have growing problem with public opinion, which also require us to reduce the use of antibiotics. That's why we have changed our mentality. I have, to be honest, read many times that Russia wants to be one of the largest exporters of healthy and organic food, so I suspect that you will not miss a similar program in your country. When I introducing a milk quality repair program, I always to try, understand and discuss the following points with veterinarians or owner of animals. First, what kind of bacteria, source of the problem. Then time of infection. And remember, the time of infection is not often the same as time when we see clinical symptoms. We should talk also about goal on the farm, because different bacteria has different goal. Then treatment and prevention also is different in different bacteria. E. coli and Klebsiella are the first representatives of environmental bacteria that I would like to talk about. I really like the sentence that the problem with E. coli mastitis will exist as long as the cow will excrete feces. That means we'll have problem with E. coli mastitis to the end of our life or cow's life. We should remember that coli mastitis depend on immunity. That is why most cases we have on summer during heat stress. And remember that mastitis in one farm may be caused by a different strain, and it's typical for environmental pathogens. E. coli does not adhere to epithelial cells, so it does not get caught by keratinocytes in the teeth. It can be surrounded by capsule, and it allows an effective invasion of the gland and quick multiplication. After death of bacteria, LPS cause a severe reaction of the organism because of reactive oxygen form. It destroys mammary gland tissue. Acute E. coli cases due to inadequate immune response. It's a large and complicated area, and maybe it's a subject for the next webinar. We have not time today to talk about nutrition, but remember that the most immunosuppressive metabolic disease is ketosis, mostly caused by negative energy balance. It causing neutrophils go to pathogens more slowly and have a reduced ability to kill them. E. coli comes to the other mostly in dry period, less often just after drying, and most often before calving, when others start to produce colostrum and teat canals start to open. The next moment of infection is time just after milking, caused by inadequate cleaning of teeth before milking. As I said before, low somatic cell count predisposed to E. coli mastitis, and stress is important factor. Farm owners often cannot understand why E. coli mastitis is found in well-managed farms, but it can definitely be said that E. coli mastitis is a disease of the best herds. We used to think that if a bacteria enters to the udder, we have symptoms immediately after that. But this is not always true. The bacteria are waiting for a decrease in immunity. And similar is in the case with E. coli. She often penetrates mammary gland during the dry period and wait for the cow's immunity decreases. In our situation is ketosis or heat stress, hypocalcemia, people screaming. This picture shows the red line, time of clinical signs in lactation, but in situation when bacteria comes to the udder in dry period. In some cases, intramammary infection in dry period cause clinical mastitis after 7-8 months of lactation. It's good to know, in my opinion, to know that when we start thinking about prevention. Thinking about coli mastitis, we see only acute cases. Edema, lying down cows, pain, but most cases are mild, sometimes up to 80% of all cases. E. coli causes sometimes also subclinical mastitis, and we can say that it's impossible to recognize pathogen after clinical signs without bacteriology. What is the goal for E. coli farm? It's twofold. First, of course, we want to decrease number of clinical cases. But most important is to reduce severity of symptoms. We don't want any more dead cows because of coli mastitis. We don't want lying down cows, destroyed quarters, decreasing milk yield. Although the modern approach to veterinary medicine leads to us reduce the use of antibiotics, Despite the introduction of all preventive methods, there will be still some single clinical cases that we have to treat. In the case of coli mastitis, antibiotics use only in acute cases with toxemia, and rather in the beginning of coli mastitis. Why? Because E. coli produce toxin which after some hours kill also her. And if we start use antibiotics too late, after 6-12 hours, it could be medical malpractice in my opinion, because in other we can't find only toxin, not bacteria. And antibiotic doesn't work with bacteria. And doesn't work with toxins. That is why most important is to use non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, which, in my opinion, those which start working less than 1 hour after administration, those which working long, and those which are characterized by anti-endotoxic effect. I prefer tolfenamic acid, sometimes meloxicam or flunixin. In case of lying down cow, irrigation is necessary, and we should use more than 10 liters fluids intravenosus, and also antioxidant because of reactive oxygen form who destroy the mammary gland. Strep uberis, it's a next bacteria, is now I think one of the most popular bacteria that caused mastitis in last year. We can find it in manure, straw, mud. Over 600 strain is known, and we can say that it's very possible that each mastitis is caused by different strain. That is why for many years there was a problem with vaccine creation. Strep uberis can live in epithelial cells, which has consequence in antibiotic treatment problems. Streptococcus uberis is known as environmental pathogens, but more and more often we can hear that he can behave as an infectious pathogen. That we can say that Strep uberis is cow-adapted. From this moment, from cow-adapted stage, Strep uberis spreads from one cow to the other cows during milking time. The time of infection is similar to E. coli. That means dry period, and exactly 1 week before calving and 1 week after drying, about. If we milk dirty teats, infection will also occur immediately after milking. Scientific studies have shown that milk yield is not important, but stress, similar to E. coli, has a huge impact on increasing clinical cases. As will all pathogens causing mastitis, we cannot recognize type of bacteria by symptoms. The symptoms that cause Strep uberis are not specific. We observe an increase in the number of somatic cell count, but not as high as another representative of Streptococci, that means Streptococcus agalactiae, and the severity of the symptoms can be different from acute, mild, subclinical form, chronic form. Strep uberis is often called a frustrating bacteria due to repeated clinical cases. Typical for this pathogen is that if we run inappropriate antibiotic treatment, mastitis returns after a few or several days after end of treatment. I will tell you why this happened in the next slides. If we observe the environmental type of Strep uberis on the farm, it is very often that the infection is during dry period. And as with coli mastitis, we observe clinical symptoms until the first 100 days of lactation. If contagious mastitis type Strep uberis dominates, clinical mastitis is found in whole lactation. But attention, similar situation will be if we milk not clean teats before milking. Of course, the main goal for us is to reduce the number of clinical cases, but if you look at Strep uberis farm, you can have learned that a large number of clinical cases is not the same as the number of sick cows. A small number of cows get sick several times, and it causes a large number of clinical cases. That is why second goal should to be decrease repeated cases. Treatment clinical case in lactation often removes symptoms, but not always bacteria. Environmental type of Strep uberis is often sensitive to simple antibiotics. In theory, strep doesn't produce beta-lactamase enzyme. That is why penicillin should work administered both intramuscularly but in this way only penetamat, or intramammary simple penicillin. But if contagious type of strep uberis dominate, we observe increase in antibiotic resistance. And I know from my practice with contagious type of strep uberis that only one antibiotic works with them. It was florfenicol. Let's talk about low treatment effectiveness. For the antibiotic to work, the bacteria should multiply. And only in this situation, antibiotic works. And Streptococcus uberis can periodically stop reproduction. The solution for that is to do longer treatment. Then we will get a better bacteriological cure. Next problem is that strep uberis can live in epithelial cells where antibiotic availability is really low. This slide shows how long we should treat with an antibiotic. In countries where I have the pleasure to work very often with mutuality, standard treatment for mastitis is 2-3 days. And with many pathogens is enough. But let's see what's happened with a 2-day treatment of strep uberis. We can expect almost 50% of clinical cure, but less than 20% of bacteriological. If we do longer treatment to 5 days, we expect 88% of clinical cure, but 56 of quarters, there will be still small amount of bacteria in the other, which after decreased antibiotic in other, they multiply again, causing repeated cases. It is proved and practice show that only 7-8 days treatment cause a bacteriological cure and significantly reduce the number of repeated cases. I would like to draw your attention to one more thing. In strep uberis farm, it's possible increase not only in somatic cell but also bacteria in bulk tank, and is similar situation with Streptococcus agalactiae. Thank you for your time, for your attention, and I will wait for your question.